Hi, everybody. It's Jane Johnston with the Barry Hill Group at RE/MAX Camosun. Welcome to the Victoria Real Estate Show. It is February 13th, and my co-host is...
Hey, everybody. It's Andrew Plank with LePage. It's the day before Valentine's Day. Love Day. Yay!
How are you doing?
Jane's wearing her RE/MAX red.
I am.
I am doing great. Yeah, I am doing well, and I'm excited that we've got a fun guest today, and we're going to... it's just a beautiful winter day.
Well, let's just talk about the weekend, because I tried to show one of your places, and I tried to book 12 showings. 7 had accepted offers, all on the weekend, which I think is a part of a side effect of the recession period.
Mm-hmm.
Adds 2 whole extra days. So how was...
I mean, you texted me, or you sent me a touch base message, which is how realtors communicate for showings. And cats in the background again. And when I let you know that there is an accepted offer on that property, you said at the time, I think 4 or 5 out of 9 that you had requested were under contract. And there's definitely a bump. And,
right. So I went and requested more because I was trying to get 6. I had my clients for 2 hours. We were doing 3 an hour. And so I ended up with 5 out of 12.
Right. 5 out of 12. So you didn't quite get to fill in the 6th slot.
And actually, they gave up after 3 because they were not great properties.
Right, the price point they were looking for and so forth. Well, we held an open house at that property that you were requesting. We had one Saturday and Sunday. Tried to get the Sunday one in just before the Super Bowl. They were both fairly well attended, and we had to, of course, let people know the second one. The offer was accepted after Saturday afternoon after the first one, but we had to let people know it was under contract, and there was a lot of still interested parties, but it's busy out there.
Right. So as listing agents, what we find sometimes is we're holding on to properties, holding, and then all of a sudden they flip and it's like dominoes and the market takes off. And I think that's what happened last weekend. And it's funny because I was saying to the buyer, we should go out on Saturday because I have a feeling it's going to be busy. And they're like, we're busy on Saturday. We can go Sunday. So we missed out. Anyway, c'est la vie. All right.
It does turn on a dime. When it turns, it's on a dime.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So tell us what's going on with the market. Today we're having Graden Sol coming from the board.
He's the chair at the real estate board, and he's going to be talking to us about the board and about what's been going on there, and maybe about organized real estate in general, maybe some stats that he has access to. So that's great. We'll have him on soon. In the meantime, we're going to talk about the stats. So let's look at those stats. What do we got there? Okay, so
Monday, February 6th, we had 57 unconditional sales compared to 718 for February. This is when the market peaked last year, folks. So we're comparing apples to oranges here. And then this, we're up to 185 so far for this month.
185 sales so far as of February 13th. And again, we're halfway through the month, you might say. There's only 28 days in February. And, double the 185, we're under 400, and we had 718 last year. So definitely paced for a much slower month.
Yeah. So, and I believe now we have pent up demand. So I think we're going to see a fast end of the month, but whatever. New listings, 161 as of February 6th and 382. So that's about half of where we were last year at 932. And active listings were almost at par, 793.
Yeah.
All righty. Go ahead.
Okay, so now we're looking at the last week activity. February 13th, Market Watch, it shows 6 new listings. Is that correct? Again, that can't be correct.
Well, I'm going to go double check right now.
Okay. Yeah. So I know we've had more than 6 new listings come on in the last week, more than 1 property go pending. So these numbers do appear to be incorrect. So we're going to have to pull up something really quickly.
I got it.
Thank you.
I realized what happened. somehow it got changed to 24 hours. We have 214 new listings in the past week compared to 130
Mhm.
pending. So list to sale ratio is up there. Price decreases are at 68, and sold listings are at 4. We only have 2 price increases, which probably are administrative, and back on markets is 5. So I know for me, I'm going to be taking a listing off the market and then putting it back on again.
Yeah, yeah. It's a common practice that realtors will do if the property's getting stale or there's been a change to the marketing strategy for it. So price changes, restaging it, new photos, those kind of things all would probably warrant a new listing as a whole, rather than just doing those changes without trying to draw extra attention to it.
I have a new assistant. So I'm finding things are changing. In my settings.
Curve and things, yeah. So we won't talk about what happened last week compared to this week, because it's just that was also just the 24 hours worth. So there you go.
Okay, let's bring in Graden. Hello, Graden.
Oh, hey guys. Just writing down some notes.
Okay.
Yeah, based upon what you guys have been talking about already, I'm like, oh, there's a lot of juicy stuff there we can talk about.
Yeah. Well, what do you think? Yeah. What we said, you want to make any comments on the stats and what you just heard?
Yeah, I think it's important when we look at stats to recognize exactly what's going on. If we try and compare it to last year was absolutely bonkers. It was the highest amount of sales, the most amount of activity that we've ever seen in the real estate board. I think we're going to have a really hard time if we compare last year to last year, or this year to last year, right? Until basically even March. I mean, you look at the trend line of activity from last year. It goes it's like a full on, like the line is going like this, and then you got last year, which was kind of this hump.
For sure.
Yeah, and even you look at our HPI numbers, which is that kind of basket of goods comparison that we use for costing a house over time.
Housing price.
Yeah, the housing price index. That's an interesting thing we use. For those of you that don't know, it's kind of like the consumer price index, because we can't track the same house over time. There's kind of a somewhat fictitious style of house. Yeah, exactly. It's like a basket of goods. We track it over time. And what happens with that is then we can kind of do proper comparisons. But an interesting thing with our HPI index right now is it's tracking the sold date in terms of the timing, not the contract date.
Mm-hmm. Date, not the pending date.
Not the pending date, right? So contract date is pending date.
It's out of sync.
Yeah, so it's actually like a true lagging indicator, right? It's already a lagging indicator because it happened yesterday, but it's a lagging indicator even more so because it's tracking the sold period, not when the contract was done. Mm-hmm. So we're actually, however long you think the average possession date is, 30 to 60 days, mm-hmm. we're kind of behind on that. And so that all gets changed within the next few months. We've got the national organization, Altus, that actually does all of that kind of tracking. We have them changing that so we have more real-time pricing data.
Please and thank you. I haven't been using the HPI partly because it's just felt
totally. Yeah. But it gives us an idea, right? It's a broad generalization. Mm-hmm. But we'll narrow that down to a little bit more of a laser focus in the coming months, and of course we'll make an announcement when that all happens, and then we'll be like, oh, now we can more accurately predict things.
Hey, Graden, I want to take a quick step back and just allow you to introduce yourself and talk about it.
Yeah, that's right. So for those of you who don't know, so I'm also a realtor. So I'm a realtor with LePage Coast Capital. I've been a realtor for 20 years. Half that time was in Calgary, Alberta, before I saw the light and figured out, hey, I can sail year round in this wonderful area called Victoria, and made that move out here about 10 years ago. Currently with LePage, and also currently the 2023 Victoria Real Estate Board Chair. I'm actually the first chair of the real estate board, because last year we were all presidents. Yeah, yes. We're all called presidents, but there's a name change. Not that I'm bitter about it. Yeah.
Now you're chair. So how does that work?
Yeah. So the chair of the real estate board. So what I do is I kind of organize and manage the meetings of the 8 other directors around the real estate board. The real estate board is a local trade association. We hold the license for the trade name realtor. That's why on Andrew's and mine, capital letters realtor with a little R. It's actually a trademarked designation that's held by CREA, which is Canadian Real Estate Association.
MLS as well.
Yeah,
It's not realtor, by the way.
Yeah, no, it's realtor. Yeah, and it's actually under license from National Association of Realtors, which is a U.S. based organization. So they don't meddle in what we do up here, but we do have that designation. So Victoria Real Estate Board kind of handles that. We do our motto is making good realtors better. Exactly, right. So we provide tools, education, local enforcement of rules and regulations. We handle all the data for the MLS, right, which is a multiple listing service, which used to be MLS.ca, right, which then became Realtor.ca. And it's important for most people to remember that it was generally, when in the beginning of it, it was a marketing tool, right? Yeah.
Back in the day, we had we had an MLS, but people were before the days of the internet, were using little booklets that when they had a new listing, they were distributing sheets of paper to add to the booklet for all the other realtors in the city. And but the MLS is a cooperative system, not just a system of it's actually like a philosophy and a legal framework, as well as what most people think of it. Most consumers think of it just as access to listings.
So for realtors who want to get involved in organized real estate, the board is a great way to start doing that. Andrew and I were on the MLS committee a long time ago together.
Yeah, and I was a director as well.
Well, that was my first. You were the director, and my first stint at the real estate board was as a committee member on
my MLS committee.
Yeah, on your MLS committee. Yeah, that was my gateway into the crazy world of organized real estate.
Look at you now,
guys. Let's talk about what we're going to talk about.
Sorry about that. Go down the love in. It's right before Valentine's Day. We're all excited about this kind of stuff. Little love fest over here.
Who's buying real estate?
Yeah. Okay. So these are fun stats. We track these at the Victoria Real Estate Board. Understand that they're not they're user input. So these happen from the realtor that does the closing of the deal. So we're tracking that from the realtor's input
information.
If they report it.
Anecdotal. Yeah.
Well, it's meant. Yeah, and most people will report it. It's great though because it gives you a really good snapshot of what's happening over time. I like this one because it tracks it over the past, say, 4 years. And you look at it, it's like, well, who are the biggest, who's buying, who's the biggest portion of buyers in our market area? 29% are 2-parent family with children.
Yeah.
Right. And so we're going to start to see some trends when we start looking at this who's buying thing. So if 30% of our market is 2-parent family with children, I would say that those are the ones that are most likely going to need a mortgage and are probably the ones that are most influenced by anything like interest rate hikes.
Okay.
They're also the ones with the most change over time,
100%.
When you've got, 1 child versus 2 children, like when you have a child coming and then more children, and as they grow up and different area needs and different space needs. So that makes a lot of sense to me.
I don't think I was looking at the stats and I'm thinking like maybe 50% of realtors are filling this out, and I think it needs to be mandatory actually, because I think we need the better the data, the more accurate the knowledge. So
our uptick's pretty high. Yeah. In terms of realtors filling it out. But yeah, there's always room for improvement. And I think that's a bigger conversation around data. So what we do know as an organization is we have increased, say, government requests for data. And then we're also going to have to start looking at, as an organization, how we collect our data so we can disseminate it in a way to policymakers that makes sense to them, rather than them asking for data and making inferences on their own. And that's the difficulty.
That's always been a funny one when we see the news
Yeah.
stories coming out where they're very skewed to a certain narrative, and yet we know as realtors that something was taken off, out of context, just to tell a story that's not actually true.
Well,
I mean,
even this data here, we have couple with no children, empty nesters, and retired couple. I mean, it depends on what the realtor interprets the couple as being.
Yeah. I mean, it's not going to be 100% accurate because it's user input, but it's a really good indicator. That's why this kind of stuff is mainly an internal use. We don't really tell too many people about it. But it's a really good trend line kind of indicator, even if the uptick's only 40 or 50%.
In terms of it's interesting to see that from 2019 to 2022, these numbers have been relatively stable across each of those categories. Yeah. And it's so interesting to see, and this is not surprising, that a single parent with children is one of the least likely people to be purchasing. It's just going to be a lot harder for someone who's a single parent to manage a mortgage and to be able to buy. Same with that retired single at 3%.
Yeah. This also matches what they say in the US, that there are more single women buying homes than single men.
Yeah. A little bit of there. It's interesting what you said before, Jane, about and Andrew, about what the government kind of parses out of it, what they take out of the data, because we have the home buyer rescission period, which was the result of a finance minister's initiative solely by herself. And it's interesting, that piece of legislation came from the finance minister, not the housing minister. Right. And so it's you get this, and it doesn't affect anything other than it makes it a little bit more difficult for the seller to kind of move on with an accepted contract. Right. And it really doesn't affect price escalation or anything, because we still have competing offers. You still accept the backup offer. Right. So it's not affecting prices.
It values the value of an unconditional offer to a seller somewhat. So they're more likely to look, I think, at if they're looking at two offers and one is unconditional and one has a condition for inspection, both with, knowing that there's a 3-day rescission period, that the unconditional offer is no longer unconditional in that sense.
Yeah. So it kind of blurs the lines of things like that.
I used to work in government, so I'm thinking maybe that minister had buyer remorse, and that's why they instituted that.
You mean that buyer, that minister's son was having a hard time buying a condo, and that's why we have all this crap now?
What we have, and it's not
pardon my candor.
The small violin, but we're seeing a lot more paperwork than we ever have, and it does create friction. And from a subjective perspective, I personally find it really onerous, but I also have noticed just how much I think the intention of it is to cause friction, to make people stop and think a little bit about what their decisions are at the same time, and that can be good. But at the same time, it also causes a lot of things that just don't allow for real estate to flow like it used to, and for people to make informed decisions, because we realtors are taking too much time to fill out paperwork for our clients than we're having time than to have discussions in the heat of the moment and in negotiations.
I told the buyer the other day, I said, just so you know, I have to fill this out and tell you that for every $10,000, I make $150.
That's a net effect of it. It's funny about that whole buyers being informed. I remember I was working with a couple, and we were looking at 5 or 6 different homes. It was the second time out, and we were in the 3rd bedroom of this fantastic house, and we go to the 3rd bedroom, and I'm like, hey, is this going to be a den or nursery? And she's like, oh, totally nursery. And he turns around and says, I don't want kids.
Oh my God. Did they break up?
Yeah, they broke up in the backseat of my car on the way home, right? They're dropping them off. I mean, I sold 2 condos as a result, right? For both the different people. But it kind of goes to that whole thing about just sometimes we assume that buyers are have these discussions and they really kind of know what's going on. But here we are with an home buyer's rescission period, giving them the option to renege on it with a penalty, of course.
Right.
But there's other things that buyers aren't discussing, like whether or not they want to have kids and whether they're moving in together.
Those are the
That's
really important discussions that
totally. Yeah.
we want to be having with our clients.
Yeah.
I mean, those bring out and elicit all of that really useful information to help people make those decisions or find out that they're not on the same page. And there's nothing worse than working with people who are not on the same page.
Totally. Which kind of brings us into, buyer motivation, right? So who makes up our thing, right? It's either, are we buying a home for an addition of a family member, right? Want a larger home. We look at the stats here. First-time home buyers make up 22% of our market, right? Now, what's interesting is first-time home buyers may also be two parents with children.
Absolutely.
Right? And so you're not I would say in other cities, major metropolitan areas that have a diverse amount of housing, our market is predominantly condos and single-family detached homes.
That's
which
the
is
middle initiative
exactly
right now. Yeah.
Exactly. So it kind of ties into that. And so what happens is we don't have the same property ladder that exists in other markets, right? So when I was a realtor in Calgary, it was normal for people to be, to buy their first house, that was, a single house, and then they'd move into a 2-bedroom, and then they move into a townhouse, and they move into an attached home, and then as a family got bigger, they'd have a detached home, a state house. So it was very common over the course of, say, 10 years to help a buyer buy and sell 3 or 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
But here, it doesn't happen that way as much. The turnover of clientele is different, right?
There's also a friction because of property transfer tax, for example,
100%.
things that make it harder for someone to actually make those moves or changes where it actually would ideally be best for them. But
and think about how that affects workplace mobility, right? Mm-hmm. Property transfer tax. So it means I can't take a job somewhere else that would feed my family because now I'm hindered by a property transfer tax that drastically reduces my purchasing power and my down payment.
Absolutely.
Anyway, yeah.
So yeah, first time buyers. My first purchase for a home was young couple, first child, needing a larger home, wanting stability, no longer wanting to be a renter, because we just knew that's, we wanted a nest. We wanted to find that stable, consistent, and also it makes you start thinking more responsibly when you have a child and thinking about the future instead of just the moment. Mm-hmm. So it is a big trigger for people.
Yeah. I mean, you look at these stats, you head down to the second one from the bottom, relocation, right? Mm-hmm. So there's your either workplace transfers, but I would say that's more of that retirement, right? Mm-hmm. That move from the lower mainland, that move from the prairies, that move from even relocation from up island, right?
Or Ontario and Quebec, I find.
Totally. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I do find that most people aren't moving neighborhoods now.
No.
And if it's work related, it has to be a significant distance away, because even now people are living in Nanaimo or living in Victoria and working in Vancouver. So,
well, yeah, there's the remote work it's a lot easier to do remote work, or if you have to be in the office 2 times a week or something, you might be more willing to live even on one of the Gulf Islands and then just commute in, but in the meantime doing your online.
Mm-hmm. I will say the people who are buying revenue property as an investment, they have a totally different way of looking at the market compared to regular families. They're really looking at return on investment, so what a place could rent for, and so they are looking for the deals, whereas a first-time buyer or a family is often looking for a place that fits their lifestyle. That's different. The motivation is entirely different.
Yeah.
So they're very what savvy is a good word for them. Okay. So what do you think is going to happen for inventory and supply for this year?
Well, I think inventory and supply are kind of closely related to demand. We look at what happened. What happened last year. So if we know that first-time home buyers and couples with kids are kind of our bread and butter of the whole market, 22% of the market. And we look at how affected they are by interest rates, right? What happened last year was as soon as interest rates started to hike and there was uncertainty in the market kind of, the volumes went down, right? So we had a dip in the volumes. And then what happened is that demand cluster still existed, but at the same time that the market volume dipped with interest rates right around Easter, we had a massive shift over to the rental market. We had our vacancy rate go down to almost zero. So that cluster of demand just shifted from purchasing into the rental market. And that cluster of demand didn't diminish. The demand cluster still existed. Now that things have stabilized, right? Now that interest rates have stabilized, people can become more comfortable with what's going on in the market. That demand cluster still exists, and they're out there shopping for homes now. So, and we still have demand from elsewhere. We have the highest percentage of baby boomers will retire this year. The highest percentage of baby boomers will hit the age of 65 this year. So that wave is still coming, right? So we didn't do anything to increase the amount of inventory of houses that we had on the market during the past, say, 4 months, right? If anything, there was a retraction. We had some interesting things happen in the on the national level. So the foreign buyer ban. I mean, there's a stat that we have where it's like 1.6% of our entire market here is what we classify our foreign buyer from outside of Canada. So that's the US, that's Europe, that's Asia, that's Australia, it's anywhere outside. 1.6% outside of Canada. So but what happens with, say, that foreign buyer ban is it has that kind of negative effect on the outlook of immigrants coming in. We know we need immigration in order for our tax base to survive, in order for labor markets to move. We need that specialized person to come in. So we have a lot of demand on inventory, and we don't have any production of it. Right. One other thing we're looking at is we're hearing that pre-sales of condo buildings has basically dropped down to zero. So the question is that a result of the anti-flipping tax, right? And sometimes it could be, right? And so we don't know yet, but these are all things that we're thinking of. So the other thing is you need pre-sales sometimes in order to get the condo started, in order to get it going. Yeah. So the very nature of a small policy change on the anti-flipping could have the effect of developers having to change how they look at funding new developments and getting those projects off the street. Reading
about a local developer that's gone into creditor protection. I think they had 30 projects on the go in Victoria.
Yeah.
And, that's because they're not getting, as you said, you need to get a certain number of pre-sales under the hood in order for the bank to give you the next loan to go forward with
and so, yeah. So yes, it's not great that some people are profiting from that kind of model because maybe it does affect affordability. But when you look at it, why not? There's probably different ways to do it, but it had a knock-on effect for inventory.
Well, that's the thing I've always found is, when you, if I ruled the world,
the benevolent dictator, Andrew,
you'd want to take a lot longer view before you start making changes to the rules, because every change you make to a rule has unintended consequences. And you're finding that with really great intentions for the public good, policies come in that actually only complicate things and make it so people still find loopholes and ways around, and it doesn't really necessarily help the public. It just creates more churn.
Yeah, and you look at how much we talk about housing affordability and attainability. You're looking at a minimum $350 a foot to build something, right? You got a 2,000 square foot house. That's a $700,000 build, not including the land or the development costs for the neighborhood. I haven't seen a piece of property go for under $400,000. So all of a sudden you're at 1.1 million plus GST, by the way, for a 2,000 square foot quote unquote starter home. And
not really high-end finish.
No, and so you start asking, well, where does the squeeze come from? Where does the squeeze come from in terms of getting that price down? Does it come from squeezing the carpenter or the plumber or the framer or the drywaller? That's the very person that needs to buy the property.
And those numbers you just quoted didn't include profit for a developer.
No, and no one, developers. That's why they exist. That's not like the government's building the houses.
No.
And then we're putting the needs of the populace on the backs of private landlords. And we're also, and the government's attacking the transaction rather than the actual root problem, which is supply. So I'll harp on supply until I'm blue in the face. I don't know if you noticed.
Well, the board has been doing that for years and pushing and trying to put it out, and it's falling on deaf ears in the media and also in the various municipalities. Although again, there is now some change in that missing middle initiative Victoria has voted in.
Yeah, and the provincial government, David Eby, who was the housing minister, is definitely pro-supply. He's one of the more amicable politicians that we've had to deal with as organized real estate. So there is hope on the horizon. But anyway, inventory, I think levels are still going to be down. We still have a tremendous amount of demand. I think the biggest thing facing us is we may not see listings climb up, so the sales volumes are going to be lower because the inventory levels are lower. Yeah, not anything else. Yeah,
lack of choice. If there's just not good choice in the properties that you're looking for, you're going to continue to wait for something.
Totally. And so our sales numbers may be lagging just because our inventory is so low, not for no other reason. The demand still exists.
Speaking of inventory and unintended consequences, and something that David Eby just put in, I got a phone call yesterday from a concerned owner of a condo. He'd bought the condo last year, and he was he lives in this condo with his 20-year-old child, and the condo has a 19+ age restriction, which worked for them. But the condo is now looking at putting in a 55+ age restriction, because the rules just recently changed that wiped away all age restrictions other than 55+. And this building does not want to have children. The owners in the building apparently don't want to have children there. And he's asking me, what does this do for the value of my home? And I'm telling him it's going to go down because you've got less now. And when you talk about housing supply, on the whole, if all of those properties, and many of them have been doing this anecdotally, that's what I'm hearing from lawyers and from colleagues, a lot of the buildings that were age restricted 19+, 16+, 35+, are shifting that age restriction to 55+. Now you've lost a lot of housing for people who are actually under 55.
Which, if you look at the demographics of the population, there's a big chunk of us.
Yeah, but it's a knee-jerk reaction.
Under 55.
Yeah. But the interest, that's a really interesting point. I think what happens though is we've seen the government just be able to make a unilateral decision. How far away are they from just deciding to do away with all age restrictions?
I think
period.
they should.
And then we have all these people trying to make all these plans to withhold things. But say you've got a building of 50 units in a building, right? The turnover for a building like that is like maybe 5 units per year. It's like maybe 10% on that on that kind of building, right? So I mean, the reality is it's not going to go from 50 units to being like half of them have kids in them, right? Because the price points that we're talking about and the type of building it is means you're probably not going to have people with kids buying into those buildings. So this very thing they're trying to protect against isn't going to happen immediately.
Right.
Yeah.
I do find though that people, usually it's the single woman that I'm working with, or the single man who is looking for a well-priced condo, and because it's 55+, they're like, "What's going on there? How come we can't move in there? Isn't that against humanitarian rights having an age restriction? We should fight this." And I'm like, "Well, I don't think you want to move into a community and start a fight like before you even move in." But I've had clients who've moved into small buildings where there've been age restrictions of 45 or 40. I think it was 45, and she was 43. And then you wonder, like, what is the point of that rule? It's so stupid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
no,
they changed it. They changed it to 43 by vote so she could go in.
Yeah. Yeah, and then brings up an interesting thing about bylaws. I've got clients that are looking at side-by-side duplexes. This is going to go off on a little tangent, and I apologize ahead of time, but it's an important one. It's most strata duplexes have standard bylaws associated with them, and standard bylaws are one dog or one cat. And the reality is if you have a client that moves into that property that has two small dogs and the neighbor next door doesn't like dogs, they can petition the court, and the court will side on behalf of the bylaws.
There's a big misconception amongst folks that buying a half duplex is they don't understand that it is strata. Yeah. And it's drilled into us realtors, a strata is a strata is a strata.
100%.
And if there's no bylaws, then the BC bylaws apply.
Yeah.
So if you don't find bylaws in the records of that strata, the BC standard bylaws apply, and that's one dog or one cat.
Yeah.
And one dog and one cat, or one dog or one cat.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I had a buyer, had like 5 dogs.
Yeah.
And they were looking for a home. We ended up having to go out to Soup because that was where they could house their 5 dogs. Mm-hmm. In the end, I ended up getting fired. We worked with another agent. Yeah. Who got them into a half duplex. Oh, and I was shaking my head about this because, and she was like, "Oh, I got into this half duplex and there's no bylaws, there's no rules against dogs." I was like,
there are. And maybe it's not enforceable until you get a neighbor that doesn't like your dogs. And the thing with bylaws is you can't not enforce them when they're put to task. And in order to change them, you need the majority of the unit holders to change the bylaws. And if you got a duplex and one of the people don't want to agree to it, then so it's only a problem until it's a problem. But when it becomes a problem and then you have to get rid of one of your pets because someone didn't do their due diligence. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. I mean, anyway, that's beside the point. So yeah, but so price stabilization, I mean, we're probably going to see prices maybe stabilize just because interest rates are so high. But I mean, we're already seeing, like, if we look at, say, HPI from like December to December, we were like up 25% and then down 25%. So like
we're back to 2021 prices.
Yeah, if we just ignore what happened last year, that'd be really cool. But
yes, but
yeah,
on the weekend. So one of my clients actually didn't like the fact that the last video that we did, Andrew, with the market update, they felt it was incorrect. And I'm like, well, being a realtor is like sitting on a pulse. We're responding moment for moment. Mm-hmm. And so I looked for 12 properties on the weekend. 7 had accepted offers. 2 were sold, like pending. So I got to know the price. 1 was well listed at 125. And that was in Vic West on Selkirk, and it sold for 1,410 with 3 offers. Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's going to be the outlier buyer who's going to be determining where the market's going right now. Same thing as before. You may have that core buyer.
If we look at that thing where it went up 25%, I'm not saying that it won't go up from now.
Yeah.
But the difficult thing is we're not going to have enough inventory to have enough sales to really kind of really dictate where the market's going to go as a whole. This year is going to be a kind of a price stabilization year to a certain extent, right? Except for the outliers, like you said, Jane. But the big thing that we're looking at right now are lending rules, and how the OSFI, which is the Office Superintendent of Financial Institutions in Canada, will change. Sorry. Yeah, no kidding.
Well done.
I think I got it right. Will change how lending is looked at, because right now we have 2 ratios, right? The GDSR and the TDSR, which is the
gross service debt ratio.
Gross debt service ratio and total debt service ratio, and it's like 32-40 or whatever percentages. So the reality is that you should be sending. The theory is that you should be spending 32 or 35%, a third of your income, on servicing your housing needs. And are they going to change that? Right? Are they going to move it up to 40? What are they doing? How are they going to change things? Are they going to mess around with amortization periods at all? that's the thing that we're looking at, saying, oh, I wonder what's going to happen with the OSFI.
And this has to do with lending practices and
Totally. This
HC
affects
and so
banks.
forth. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
this
the
affects
thing
banks.
is, it's going to affect the people who are marginalized already.
I agree 100%. Yeah.
So all these, I don't know. Personally, anyway, I get why they increased the lending, the mortgage rates, but it did. We're going to start to see the effects, I think, this year.
Well, then it has those unintended consequences again, where we end up in a situation where, you know, say the first time home buyer, dual parent with a kid, are unfairly looked at in the mortgage lending rules rather than the person that has a schwack of cash coming into the market. Right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So again, unintended consequences of major policy change, which is again why when we look at it from a board level, how do we increase the validity of our data and how do we disseminate that data so that the people that make decisions can make informed decisions?
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's our task. Yeah. Nothing small to do. It's just these big things, right?
Mm-hmm.
That sound boring. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Andrew, do you want to talk about? We're not going to be on next week, by the way, folks. Just wanted to say that because it is Family Day weekend.
Oh, right. Okay, and we don't do holidays, and Family Day.
Remember that when we're writing contracts and everybody puts a possession day of Monday.
Yeah. You have to watch that.
Yeah.
So we'll be back, and then
everyone.
In 2 weeks it'll be just Andrew because I'm going to be away in Vegas at the Remax convention.
You'll be having fun in Remax in Vegas. Okay, so what happens there? Don't tell us. So I'll see everyone on the 27th. And in the meantime, thanks, Graden and Jane, and for being here. And Graden, do you want to let people know how they can reach you?
Yeah, you know, obviously, if you're looking for real estate advice, reach out to me, home@gradensol.com. But for Victoria Real Estate Board chair stuff, I mean, check into the VREB website. We post a bunch of really good stats. If you want to be kept abreast of the stats package every month, that's where you go.
Okay, Andrew, how do people get in touch with you?
You can reach me at 250-360-6106. Email info@andrewplank.com. AndrewPlank.com is the website, including bios and videos and versions, copies of this show. And then on Instagram, PlankAndrew. Just Plank Andrew.
The Plankster.
Plankster.
Okay, and if you want to reach me, I'm Jane Johnston with the Bar Hill Group. My number is 250-744-0775. You can reach me at barhillgroup@gmail.com. And we do have these videos and more at victoriarealestateshow.com. And I'm on Instagram at realtyteacher_remax_Victoria and Vancouver Island Luxury Living. Thank you, Graden, for coming today. We really appreciate it.
Very much.
Thanks for having me, guys. See you out there.
Okay, see you out there. Bye.